No person shall disrupt the proceedings of a meeting of a public body if, after clear warning from the chair, a person continues to disrupt the proceedings. The chair may order the person to withdraw from the meeting, and if the person does not withdraw, the chair may authorize a constable or other officer to remove the person from the meeting. All right, roll call. Counselor Bottomley.
Here.
Counselor Forgy.
Here.
Okay. Counselor Golub.
Here.
And Counselor Toronto.
Here.
And Counselor DeSorga, I am here also. Approval of the minutes, none. Public comment. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say? Any meetings, members of the public, before we get started? Okay, onward. Public hearing, none. Budget discussion. Fiscal year 2024 capital budget recreation. First step would be Christy, who I can see you're off in the mountains somewhere beautiful. It looks lovely right now. I wish I were there. And I don't know if that's really true or if that's the background on your computer.
Sadly, it's just the background, but a place I have been.
Oh, it's so beautiful. So anyways, you're up first. Appropriate $185,000 by transfer from Fund 8402 Capital Stabilization for Rocky Mountain Highland Trail Wayfinding Map Development. And what could you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, this is a project that has been a long time coming, I would say. We have many trails out on the ridge there that are sadly not marked very well. Some people have made new trail paths. We don't have any sort of paper or electronic map. And this entire project would create a unified system so that park users will know what trail they're on, how far it is to any sort of trail turn. A lot of people don't know how long the trails continue to, from ridge end to ridge end. And it will also have emergency management markings with GPS so that our public safety officials can identify where a person who may be injured that needs support will be on the ridge line. And then this will also be, some of the land is under Conservation Commission, so it'll be in collaboration with them, certainly on the land that they own and manage.
Okay. Christy?
Yes.
Isn't there a map of the Highland Park one? I think I actually was lost in there once for a couple of hours when I first moved to town, and then swore I would never go in again without printing something. So I know in my backpack, I have a little something, it's red, yellow, blue. It must just be Highland Park. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
That's correct. That map, Eric Twarog and I worked on, maybe in 2010 or 12. I can't remember how long ago that was. And we worked really hard with multiple GPS units to try and GPS marker. There are some trails that will have a G and a number, the blue and the red, so that if you passed one of those markers and got lost, that you could call 911 and they would be able to figure out where you were on the trails. But it is only that the Highland section. It does not include the entire trail line. Technology has changed a little bit. Obviously, as always, we try and stay on top of the technology changes with trail mapping. And a lot of it can be digital now. And the trail markings that we put on the trees, some of them have fallen off or have just disappeared. So that's why I'm assuming you guys have the packet that we submitted to the Capital Improvement Committee. You can see like there's like wooden posts now that most trails use, so you're not attaching a nail and any placard to a tree.
So it's going to be all the trails but up through Poet Seat there too? I've been lost there as well.
Yeah, basically from the Highland Pond area all the way up to the bed and breakfast. I think it's called Stone Hill Bed and Breakfast, the property that we recently acquired towards Stop and Shop. So it's entire ridge line that we would be mapping and figuring out where all the trails go and what kind of numbering system we should use for figuring out the distance from point A to point B. Like the red trail goes, 1 mile, and then you can turn onto the blue trail, or however we end up labeling these trails. And then obviously the kiosks will be replace the ones that are sadly broken and need some help. They would be more wooden in nature, so it blends in more with the environment, not the plastic recycled stuff that sadly has been damaged. I think it's a great project. It has a lot of support and interest, and I'm hopeful that you guys will support it, move it forward.
Did CPA vote for some money towards this?
This one, they did not. I did tell them that it had moved through with capital, so they were hopeful that this would be funded through capital.
Who else has questions on this? I always have more, but let's see if someone else has other questions. I see Mike has his hand up. Go ahead, Mike.
I guess it's not a question specifically on this, but I guess on, but it was Recreation Department, which had to do with the erosion thing. I saw kept coming up with red marks near it. Does anybody have an explanation as to what that was about? Was it withdrawn? The erosion at the Green River swim area. Is that why it came up as red on all of the other things?
I mean, I can explain that, Mike. Jenny, if you'd like.
Oh, please, by all means, go right ahead.
The red markings were just to indicate that we were going to repurpose some funds that we already had. But we actually didn't move the project forward in the mayor's recommendations because there is other funding available for that work in Public Works. Marlo has some.
Cool.
So he had noted that to the mayor. So that's why you don't see it in your recommended packet.
Okay. Cool. It just had, it had these like little markings on there, like asterisks and little symbols. And I was like, what happened? But that was all. But no, other than that, I don't have any, I like this project, actually. I think a lot of folks use this trail often, very often.
Mhm.
And I think it's good. I think it draws a lot of people from outside our community to it. So we should be telling them that where they can go so they don't get lost.
Anybody else? Oh, Chris, Council Forgy. Go ahead, Chris. You can.
Thank you. This was not on the recommended that came forward from the mayor, but I wondered, Christy, if you would talk to us a little bit about the pickleball court and the article that I read in the newspaper the other day about CPA approving a feasibility study for that. I think that there's a lot of interest in our community in having that project go forward. But I know that we have talked about the fact that that it's not going to move forward this time, and that the CPA did approve the feasibility study design money for the project. So could you comment on that? It's not on our list, but I think it's of interest to the public. Thank you.
Sure. Well, obviously I asked for pickleball funding for both places, and I know that Greenfield only has a limited amount of money, not just for operating, but for capital projects. So the CPC, majority of the requests were for recreation. And again, obviously they couldn't fund everything. We just didn't have enough money. So in all the deliberations there, we decided that it was best to work on design and feasibility of the location, and then we'll get an actual cost to build these and perhaps apply for not just capital, but for a park grant in the future to expand our pickleball courts in the area. It is a popular sport. It continues to grow. There's a huge group of people in our community and throughout Franklin County that come to we were the first outdoor court that was ever built. I will share at Green River Park, and it is highly used. And so we had hoped that with the CPC money that'll eventually make its way through you guys for approval as well, will help us get that ball rolling and bring pickleballers back to Greenfield for tournaments.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'd just like to comment, I think that was probably the only meeting that you've ever had where people came dressed up as pickles. Is that correct? I saw that. You all see that? Yes, it was amazing.
Yes, there was 2 people.
I know them. Yes. Right?
I have a couple of questions. My first is just a follow-up. I want to make sure. So the erosion project is happening just with funds from DPW. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think the mayor, can speak more to that, but that's my understanding.
You're correct. That's correct. That project is happening with funds from DPW. There were some leftover funds, and I forget off the top of my head right now where they were from, but it will more than amply cover that project.
Thank you.
They were from FEMA for a similar previous
Okay.
type of situation.
Great. Okay. And my
And I
second,
can, Jeannie, I can follow up with that. We will have to go through permitting process to do that work, and DPW has already started that.
a different question. First, I just want to say I also really like this project. I think it's very important. I imagine there's a lot of that trail that I haven't hiked because I don't want to get lost. So I'm really glad that this is going forward. And also, to be honest, the $185,000, when I first look at that, it feels like a lot of money. I don't know how much projects like this cost, but I'm curious. And I'm curious about that. And one thing I was thinking about is the electronic aspect of that, and if that is absolutely necessary. I want to make sure that a wayfinding project happens. And if we weren't to fund the entire amount, what might a lower amount be? These are thoughts that I'm having before we deliberate on it tomorrow, and if there's other alternatives.
Christy, can I follow up with that? Because my concern too, I watched some of the CPA meeting. I've been lost there. I love hiking, but I've been lost a few times. So the wayfinding part of it, I think is fabulous. The kiosk cost was expensive. I heard John Pasiglia saying something about possibly the tech school making some signs. I hike a lot, and many times they have a wooden sign and there'll be, like maps in a covered thing that are part of the sign. And so if there were a lesser amount for the wayfinding, like that Catherine said, could you just speak to that?
Sure. So the digital part it would be that you can find the map mostly on your phone. There's a website called All Trails. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but in other cities our size have apps that you can follow where you are on the trail. So that's what I envision. But I am not a a coder by any means to create this stuff. So that's why we would need a designer to work on that. One of the issues with our trails, as I said in the beginning, is that we really need to map and determine where all our properties are. It's no secret that some of our trails right now are on private property. And so we would need to determine exactly where our boundaries are and then figure out if we want to do any sort of easement with the landowner, or if we need to move our trail further onto our land. So there's a lot of legal costs involved with this because like I said, it's just because it's always been where it is doesn't mean that it's legally where it should be. And then the kiosks, I mean, we all know the construction costs continue to rise, and these estimates are based on similar projects that I found across the country with my colleagues. I am somebody who wants to be sure to have a design that can easily be replicated at any other future parkland that we end up purchasing or expanding. So I like this design, but again, that's why we hire a designer. This is just the suggestion that I put forward with the request. And certainly if something comes in cheaper, we all know that money will be could be turned back to the city if we don't expend it all, but this is the best estimate that we have prepared through research with our colleagues. And trying to do phases, I know CPC asked me that as well. Like anything, it would have to be the engineering and design work to figure out where the trails and stuff go. But you'll see with like the next project, the hard part is that we don't get all the money at once. If there's delays, costs continue to increase, and then we're going to need more than being able to do it all at once. I think that answers all the questions. I know if I missed one, let me know.
Mayor,
The mayor has her hand up. Mayor, go right ahead, please.
Follow up with what Christy said. That's a figure that she has come up with. Understand that a project like this would go out to bid. And as with most things, it may come in at, on the money, 185, but it could come in less. So apropos of what she did say just now, sometimes that money, ends up being less and can be returned back. That's a figure that's based on similar projects, but it may not be the exact figure. And when we go out to bid, Laura's here, she can attest to that. We take the lowest bidder for the most part that fits all the other criteria in a proposal.
Thank you. I have one question for Director Schindler on this. So the grant, the clean green, the energy grant that we got last year was for cars, for 2 cars. That was the initial repurposing that we thought was going to go for Green River erosion control. So once those cars are ordered, that 30,000 will be available to repurpose. Not that we have an order for that, but that's 30,000 that will be available, correct?
I believe the number was actually 40, but yes, that is my understanding as well, that exactly what you said.
Okay, so that's something.
Information about some cars that is
Yes.
waiting to be attended to. But in the meantime, until that happens,
Right.
that's the thing, we really should ensure that,
Okay.
the purpose was for those vehicles.
Oh, no, I know that. I know that
But
that's
yes,
what it's
that is
for.
the intention.
Okay,
I just want to
yes.
clarification. I just want to say back to you, Christy, what I think I'm hearing, which is that you've looked at, I don't know how much a project like this costs. I'm learning all sorts of things about prices in this role. And what I think that I hear you saying is that you've looked at what projects like this cost in other areas, and you've taken time to really look at this, and that is actually the realistic cost of what a project like this costs, given your research. Am I
Correct. I mean,
hearing that correctly?
That's my job as the director when I present stuff, is to get budget numbers and figures that are accurate, not overly inflated. Like the trail mapping and legal costs, I mean, that alone could be 35 to 45,000 for all that work. So
Mhm.
it's, and then you have, designing, the engineer, purchasing all the equipment, installing it.
Thank you.
All righty. Any more questions on the trails? All right, on that happy note, this will be very quick. Appropriate 80,000 by transfer from free cash for installation of Beacon Park bocce courts. I think that the CPA approved 75.5 of that. And because I watched that, and then Disability Access put in the rest.
Yes.
Is that not
45.
correct?
Correct. Yep.
So we're pretty much all set on that one, right? Is that right?
Yeah, so this is where obviously we have two entities who have the bocce project in front of you. CPC will be, I think, comes next week. I can't remember for you guys. There is some information that Diana and I were talking about that we have to figure out some wording with the CPC funding as far as basically it has to either be on the deed that it's Parks and Rec land. That's what we're trying to figure out. Diana, I don't know if you were able to find anything since we talked this afternoon to clarify that. But that's the only stipulation with the CPC money, or we get it with capital. So either way, I'm hoping to be able to get the money to finish this project.
All right. So, but it looks like that's in process. And I don't know how that transfer happens, but you knew that we voted from our handicap parking fund for I think it was 3,500 or 4,500 to go for the rest of that. So hopefully that will.
As long as there's a vote somewhere.
Yes, there is. That was unanimous. So that sounds wonderful. And I just want to point out, that's a project that we also we partially funded, and then part of it was then funded by CPA.
Correct. And just to clarify, it was 4,500, Ginny.
Okay, very good. 45.
And just also, so that still would go, still is going forward as far as the CPA funding, the request, but it has been recommended by CPA at this time.
Right. I think we got the financial order on that this morning, I believe. So that's great. So wonderful. So Christy, it's okay if I call you Christy, right? Cars. I have a question about cars. In your department, does anybody have cars that they drive home?
No, we were not approved for that.
Okay. All right. How many vehicles do you have? How many vehicles
One.
are assigned? Okay. All right. Very good. Does anybody have any more questions for a person with a beautiful mountain view behind her?
It is in the Adirondacks, just so you know.
Oh, it's lovely. I think I've been there. So there you go. Anyone else? All right. Okay. Thank you so much. You're welcome to stay and listen to us bits. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next up, if you can come on, if you want to sit over there, it's fine. If you want to sit at the table, everybody's always welcome at the table. It's our table, and we're in this together.
I mean, for your sake, I thought they were.
So next up, we have appropriate $470,000 from borrowing to purchase an ambulance. So take it away, Chief.
Sure. So what we're asking for is the purchase or replacement for our ambulance 2, which is a 2009 international ambulance that we purchased used from a department that well used it before we got it. And it's getting to be at its end of life. The reason why we're putting this request forward now is talking to all the manufacturers of ambulances. It's 2 years before delivery. And so although we're asking for the funding to be appropriated now, we don't anticipate spending the funding for it. It won't be next fiscal year, and it would be lucky if it was the following fiscal year. And because there's such a lead time on this purchase, that's why we're putting it forward now, anticipating 2 years out to be purchased or to be delivered. The ambulance includes the cost of the stretcher and the loading system. So in the back of our ambulances, we have a automatic loading lifting system. So the stretchers themselves are automatic. So we're not, saving people. We're trying to save people's back and injuries. And the device that loads them actually into the ambulance gets hooked up, lifts the stretcher up and puts it in so that it keeps the injuries down. And that cost is around $40,000 to the price tag of the ambulance. Our ambulances are the most heavily used pieces of equipment we have. They respond, the primary ambulance goes out 1,700 times a year. That ambulance needs maintenance, even though it's new. It needs oil changes and things like that. And without a second ambulance, when those outages would occur, we wouldn't have any availability to respond with an ambulance. The current ambulance that we're looking to replace has got tremendous amount of rust throughout the truck. We seem to be replacing many components to the truck. We just replaced the water heater. We had to repair a fender. We had to repair a pump. We've had to do a tremendous amount of maintenance to this truck, and it's just getting to be cost prohibitive to keep putting that volume of repairs into a truck, and especially, forecasting it 2 years down the road, it could be in pretty tough shape by then.
When did we get the other ambulance?
So we actually ordered it, I believe, 2 fiscal years ago. And we took delivery over the summer
And how did we pay for that?
out of the ambulance revenue account.
Is that what we're still doing?
Not with this ambulance. We're asking for borrowing on this ambulance.
No, but on the first one, I remember we increased the
Yes.
annual to $265,000 a year that we can take out of the revolving.
Yeah, we have 5 years left.
We have 5 years left.
I believe so. We did it for a 6-year lease. We pay for it when we take delivery of the truck.
Right.
Yep,
And
it's
so,
our first payment.
okay, so it's a 6-year lease?
Counselor, I would have.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's all right. I'm sorry, I didn't think,
Around
I
there.
just thought of that while we were sitting here. I'm sorry, I didn't think to ask you that ahead of time. I try to ask my questions, a lot of time. So, what, so now I feel like I shouldn't ask you more questions about that, but is there some left over from that after we pay the lease payment every year? Do you have any idea? From that 265?
In the ambulance account? No, we leased it right to
Up to the max.
We had to cut quite a few things out of the truck that we wanted.
So you think it's 265 a year for 6 years?
No.
No.
Our payments are, I think, are 50 to 70. I'd have to double
Okay,
check.
all right, got it, all right.
But that comes out of the ambulance revenue account.
Yep.
We're asking
Okay.
for this one to be borrowed again.
Yep.
And the payment wouldn't come out of this fiscal year. It'd be at least 1, if
Yep.
not 2 fiscal years down the road.
Okay, got it. And
The other part of this is that if we were to go ahead and secure the authorization for the borrowing for this, even though we wouldn't be borrowing until the truck got delivered, we lock into the contract price for this year. Okay, the average price that we've been seeing for apparatus, whether it's fire trucks or ambulances, anywhere between 3 and 6% increases over a year. So if we ordered it in 2 years, you could theoretically see anywhere between 6 and 12% additional cost than ordering it now, if that makes sense.
do you think by having 2 new ambulances that the call volume is going to change and we wouldn't be using AMR on occasion? Or it's just that we'd be using this backup for when you were sending the first one out for oil changes, et cetera?
So this one would probably turn into the first line piece. Remember that ambulance's first line duty, which we call the first piece out the door, usually does anywhere between, the recommendation is anywhere between 3 to 5 years, and then it gets puts in the back row for up to 10 years. This truck is a 2009, so you can see that we've extended that use of that truck. So by the time that we would receive the new truck, we're estimating it to be about 3 to 4 years, probably closer to the 4-year mark. And at the 5th year, you want to kind of rotate that out anyway. So it falls into the projection of keeping the trucks in rotation.
Okay.
And it is the goal, although we fell a little short with this one, it is the goal down the road that all ambulances will come out of the ambulance revenue account once we can establish a rotating mechanism for the 2 ambulances.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Our call volume with our ambulance, even as a backup to AMR, for transports into the Franklin, right? That's not to the other hospitals, but transports into Franklin. We are the second busiest ambulance company outside of AMR for the amount of patients that we take to Franklin. Most services that do our volume, actually pretty much all of them now run at least 2 rigs for that simple reason that you can't afford to be down a rig. With our staffing that we've been working on, the availability of that second rig becomes more and more as we start stabilizing our staffing. So the truck I anticipate would get, even in the backup role, be used more than it is currently now.
I remember the dramatic increase in the calls. I remember you, I don't remember what the statistics were, but I remember you telling us that a couple of years ago or a year ago. So, and the population is aging. I know how often on my street we call frequently. I saw one there today. Do we have any more questions on the ambulance? This was unanimous positive from Capital Committee.
Just a couple of other questions. The other 2 items that you had requested funding for, what ended up happening with those?
So I don't believe they made it with a positive recommendation out of capital, and therefore it was not sent or forwarded to you folks.
Will those be in your operating budget?
No.
Okay.
No, we can't. We will try to do the best we can with the rescue equipment, but no, we won't be able to absorb that in the operating budget.
Okay.
More questions? I have a question on cars.
Yep.
So could you tell us about the cars that, the driving, just regular vehicles? That you have a vehicle. But who else drives a vehicle home? And could you tell us about those vehicles?
Sure. So we have 4 smaller vehicles. They're car 1, car 2, car 3, car 4. Car 1 is the vehicle that I use, that I respond off hours with 24 hours a day. The other cars are also take-home cars. The one of them is the fire prevention officer, who is responsible for code and enforcement. And code and enforcement's a 24-hour job for him. That gets called in regularly, and the other 2 vehicles go to the the day shift captains, and they function equally as our safety officer, and also count towards our deployment model. And what I mean by that is I just got notified last night of this. We are due for our ISO review, which is our insurance rating. And part of our grading for our fire department is how we deploy our assets. And we get credit for off-duty folks in that capacity as responding as the first due in, like if we strike a first storm or we have a building fire, they give us credit. And what that ultimately does is it lowers our insurance rating, which affects everybody's homeowner's insurance and could save everybody some money on their homeowner's insurance. It's a complicated
No, that's good.
deployment matrix that they go by, but NFPA standards for a city our size for a first alarm response is 12 firefighters. There's no way that we can do that now with our mutual aid partners and then our command staff that I have that's off duty that would respond like myself. Those help us get to those numbers, which is favorable through the ISO process.
Okay. So what kind of cars are they?
Great question. So car one is a Chevy Tahoe.
How's that fueled?
They're all gas powered.
Okay.
The Chevy Tahoe is a larger vehicle than we originally anticipated, but as I went through the process last year, I said that availability and cost was going to be a factor, and the Tahoe was much cheaper than a smaller car, and it was available. The other cars were not available for a year and a half plus. The second car is a more efficient, fuel efficient car. It's an Explorer. It's just a straight Explorer. It's not a hybrid. And then the two older cars are an old Escape, which is a small little vehicle. That's a 2007 or 8. And the last vehicle is a old police cruiser. That was taken offline, that was going to be scrapped, and we put a little bit of work into it, and that's what we're using.
Oh, that's great. I like that recycling, but just like a little side. Were they purchased or leased?
Every small vehicle has been leased.
Okay,
None have been purchased through borrowing.
okay. All right.
And are they kept in town or?
Yes.
Okay, they're all kept in town. Do you know what okay, and the mileage on them, do you know
They're
that?
pretty low.
I wouldn't expect you to know that.
Yeah, I don't know it off top of my head, but they're pretty low. They don't get used that much.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, the television audience, hands up, I apologize. I saw Counselor Forgy first and then Counselor Toronto. You go ahead, Chris.
Actually, I'll defer to Mike because he was before me.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't looking that way. So,
That's okay.
Mike, you're first.
No problem. Thanks, Chris. Kind of following up on the last department, we were just going over on how it looks like the possibility of some 80 grand in free cash might not need to be spent from our free cash. It might be coming from other avenues. I don't know, maybe offer up that maybe two options in this scenario is either if we could put 80 towards this vehicle, so we'd have to borrow less, or I did see that the 48,000 for the rescue equipment kind of got nixed. Maybe an option. I don't know if that was if these are possibilities for how to move some of that money around or make a different, order down the line. Just as if we're making adjustments to what was proposed, and then we ended up finding out that we may not have to utilize that, or I don't know if this is not an avenue that can be used for, perhaps, I don't know, but I just figured I'd throw it out there as an option.
Good. All right, Counselor Forgy and then the mayor.
Thank you. Hi, Chief. I wanted to know what the internal policy is regarding the use of vehicles that go home. In other words, I understand the 24/7 approach, but is there a restriction placed on the use of those vehicles? For instance, you can't take it to church on Sunday, or you can't, go to the grocery store while using the fire department vehicles.
Yeah, so the 3 vehicles outside of the vehicle that I drive are restricted to work duty alone.
Thank you.
Anything more? Or the mayor? Mayor, you have your hand up. You're next. Go ahead.
I do. Thank you. Just to address Mike Councilor Torunzo's commentary about the additional items under the chief's budget, those were never really brought forward for appropriation, so that in essence, I guess that money doesn't exist. What you see in front of you is what was put forward for appropriation. So the financial order is for $470,000 from borrowing. It is, I presume, possible if you don't fund the bocce court piece from free cash, that money could be used. But as far as the other 2, they were never brought forward. So,
Well, that was I understood that. I was saying like it as a later, since we didn't know this at the time, that we might be able to use that 80,000 somewhere else. So it because you had approved it to go for the courts, kind of in the same way that red line got nixed on the public works, being able to cover the erosion control. If you thought of this as like a red line, would you have moved money or requested something different when putting it together? So I was thinking of it as a food for thought, as maybe a future financial order. That was all I was posturing.
the only reason that red line was there and why it didn't come forward is because there was already money that had been appropriated and not used. In other words, there was a project somewhere along the way that was appropriated and there was leftover money. So that money sits there. That's why it can be used for the appropriation for the erosion control. So that's all I'm trying to say is that, we have to have money that we have to use the money that we have either already appropriated or that we have put forward for appropriation. Is sort of the short version of it. That, what happens down the road is to a certain extent up to you with regard to any of these fundings. But the ambulance the reason we say put the bocce court in for free cash is because it's very much a low dollar event. In the grand scheme of things, a low dollar amount that can come out of free cash. Whereas the $470,000 is an amount that you would want to borrow for.
Sure.
That's all.
Sure. And if we don't, so since hypothetically, if the CPA was to fund the rest of that, the bocce court along with the other supplemental funding that was there, this 80,000 would just turn back to the general fund. Is that right?
Where it would go is not yes, I presume that is correct. It could be used, it could be repurposed, let me put it that way, for this other event, for this other item, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's I guess what I was suggesting is that it could just be, if there was a before the time runs out, to repurpose it was, I guess, what I was suggesting.
Anything more? I'd love to know, and I should have asked this, I would love to know how much it is. Like, if maybe, I don't know who holds the leases, but I didn't think of looking at the lease on the first one. I just wondered if maybe, do you hold the leases, Laura?
No.
Okay, all right, we'll just find out maybe how much it is a year.
We can, you were asking what the current truck lease is.
Yeah, that's all.
If you give me 2 seconds, I can look it up in last year's budget book.
Oh, well, I can go back and look at it.
Yeah, it's
I just-
whatever's,
I had that book out, yes, okay.
yeah, whatever's budgeted in last year's budget book out of the ambulance revenue account is what it costs.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, Diana, did I interrupt? I'm sorry. All righty, any more questions for Chief Strain?
Appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great. Good job. Okay. So you're all welcome to come up or sit there, whichever you prefer. If we're very friendly up here.
Still warm.
All right. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Appropriate $575,000 from borrowing for upgrades to the police station.
Correct. So that is the second year of the plan that we submitted 2 years ago to the council. 2 years ago, the council asked us to go back and have an architect give us a better reading on costs, if you remember that. So we went back to the architect last year. The council was gracious enough to approve money for our dispatch center and the water infiltration and some fencing that needs, security fencing that needs to go. We can't put the security fencing in until we do the water issue. This year, we're looking for part 2, which is the gender inclusive locker rooms. If you remember from our explanation in the past, that we got that station over 20 years ago, about 23, 24 years ago. And it fit our makeup of our department exactly to the sex of the officers that we had at the time. We've increased, in particular, our female employees. Right now, we have, I believe, 5 females. We just hired another one last week. And then we also have 8 female dispatchers that use a locker room that have 4 lockers in them. We were able to add an additional locker for one of our female officers, and we had to put it in a shower stall. So that's not good for the equipment. They have electronic equipment. It's not the right way to treat employees. Our female supervisor should be in with the other supervisors in their locker room. That locker room is run out of space and there's not enough room. So she opted to stay into the female locker room. But again, we're treating a female employee differently than we treat the male employees, and that's just not right. So we've looked around at different types of solutions. And we're looking at the future of what we think, where we want to go, and we want to become a more diverse police department. And that includes being on the gender spectrum. So we have, in the future, we're going to hire people of all genders. So we feel it's appropriate to, if we're going to make adjustments in our locker room, to go to a gender inclusive locker room. And then that plan was made, like I said, 2 years ago, and this is the second year, and this was the plan from the beginning to have this in this year's capital.
Okay, so last year, for those who were on this, we voted 904,000. The 904,000, the estimates that we had were 105,000 for water infiltration, the dispatch room improvements, 185, and the locker room improvements were 575,000, which actually I got total 865. Maybe the improvements, must have been the improvements to the booking room. So of those,
We had the fencing outside as well.
and we had the fencing. Thank you, Chief Haig. Okay. So of those things, what has been finished?
Nothing's been finished. This year, the priority for the town was to work on the library and the fire department. We work with Pacheco Ross Architects, which is the same agency of that was working with the fire department. And although we asked them in the beginning of the year to help us come up with plans, they were unable to because they're spending their time working with the fire department. And once they were able to establish the fire department, they then started working with our agency. So we were about a half a year behind on that. Right now, we have hired the architects to make the plans. They're at the last stage of the plan. Laura can help me with this. And I believe that we're right at the cusp of going to RFPs. So we're hoping to start construction of both the water infiltration and the dispatch room. I'm crossing my fingers at July 1, but this is an interesting year to try to get projects done. And everybody's behind on everything. So, but we are moving forward with the projects. They're just not completed yet.
There have been countless emails going all the way back to the beginning of the fiscal year.
Right.
With the contractors, with the architects trying to get a plan in place. We haven't sat on it. Just getting people in this line of work right now, it's been crazy to get people ironed out. Additionally, the water issue has become, again, I'm not an engineer. We can't put a fence in because we don't know where the water's going to go. We don't know how to get to the back of the water right now. We need somebody to come in. That's what Pacheco Ross, when we met at the station, went out back, looked at it, identified what we need to do, and that's part of the plan that we're waiting on.
Okay, who has more questions on this?
So understanding what this new amount, so the work is not complete from last year's amount and or the amount that was appropriated. So I'm reading here and I'm wondering the breakdown, and I'm imagining that it's probably in these papers. But the thing, it says the request for fiscal year 24's portion of changes would be to address 1, new Sally Port, 2, the locker room improvements, which 575, according to Councilor DeSorder's number, was appropriated last year. And then 4, securing existing site utilities.
Correct.
Can you give me the breakdown of how much you're hoping is appropriated for each of those?
I can answer that for you, Councilor. So yes, while it was appropriated last year, we're also very understanding that we're not going to get to the locker room this year. So that money's not going to be borrowed or anything else. So that's your 575. So the only monies that we're working with currently are the $185,000 for the dispatch room improvements, the $11,000 for the securing the existing site utilities, which is the fencing, and the 105 for addressing water infiltration. That's what we're using in this current fiscal year that we'll have to do carry forwards for and encumber at the end of this fiscal year. The remainder of that $900,000 number is not going to be borrowed for this year. We have pushed it to next year. We're not currently asking for money to address the Sally Port or anything else for that matter with the parking lot. We're not asking for the flooring improvements or the improvements to the booking area at this time for obvious reasons that we need to kind of go in order, and we'll push those out to year 3. Realistically, we'll probably have to get new numbers again because even though these are probably not very accurate because they were last year's number. So that's the number. We're just taking the 575 from this year and pushing it to next year for the ask. We're not gonna borrow that out of this year for encumbrances.
I'm going to follow up, and I thank you in advance for your patience as I learn how these numbers work.
Yep, no problem.
So 904 was appropriated last year. The intent was 105 for water, 185 for dispatch, 575 for lockers. You're saying the lockers, and I hear that being the top priority, but that wasn't covered last year and it won't be covered next year. But And I want to say I really appreciate the intent behind the locker request and to have diversity of genders. I think that's really important. I appreciate you naming that. But if that's the top priority, and if that's the top priority and it wasn't covered last year and it won't be covered this year.
No, it will be covered this year. The locker
It
room
will be
that's what we're asking for this year, is the locker room.
Okay, so then
That's the
what?
only priority we have for this year, is just that 575 for the locker rooms. We just knew we weren't going to get it done in this fiscal year, so we said we're not going to even try to pursue it right now. We just won't use any additional borrowing for that, and we'll ask for it this year. And the lockers are going to be locker rooms a priority for this year, this upcoming fiscal year.
So what were if the projects aren't complete that last year's money was requested for, what was the money spent on from last year?
We haven't spent any money.
No, we spent a little bit of money on the plans.
Well, on the plans for
Yeah, on the
dispatch, though,
plans,
we haven't
right.
spent any money on locker rooms.
Not on the locker room plan.
We've spent money on the dispatch piece to get the dispatch and the water infiltration.
Right.
We don't have a design for the locker rooms at this time. We have blueprints that they had given us kind of rough, 2 years ago when we kind of went through this project, but we haven't expended anything towards a locker room piece. We're only working on dispatch this year and that water issue currently.
Okay. So just the dispatch and the water infiltration should be
And fencing.
290. 290, 300,000. So there would be then 600 left from last year. Does anybody else have the same math?
That's what I'm wondering.
Right?
We haven't taken any money though. I just want to be clear on that.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'm just talking about,
Yeah,
Yeah,
those numbers come to 875. We had some smaller figures in there where we were looking at improvements to the booking area. The kitchen replacement was 22. We bounced that out too. So that those things may have been in there as far as the money that we had asked, what we could squeeze out of it, but we're not squeezing any of that out of there. We're just doing those 3 items that we talked about. So there's not any additional borrowing except for those 3. Dispatch, fence, water. There's no money to return. We haven't borrowed it.
oh, no, I get it. Very good. More questions? Yes, go ahead.
So the appropriation still stays though? We
Oh, yes, it's still
appropriate,
there.
so That's what I'm
Just an
confused.
unauthorized amount, basically, in the borrow, that's what he's saying. The appropriation stands, but there's been a part that's just hasn't been borrowed. It's just sitting.
Right.
Right, which makes sense, but there's an additional 575 on top of the 600 that's not completed. Is that right?
I'm showing just the 550 is unauthorized, so. I don't know where you're coming up with that first amount you said. Is that?
Well, because we were saying dispatch, water and fencing comes to roughly 300,000, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And we appropriated 904.
Okay,
So that leaves 600 or whatever.
550.
Right.
Yes, left.
It would
So
cover it.
that appropriation would continue, correct? I mean, could be used in the following year?
Yes, right. There's no encumbrance. It just continues as a capital
Right.
appropriation. So that capital appropriation that's already been funded hasn't all been used. That's what the chief's saying. That will just continue. Now, I think they're asking to do additional items in the project, and they're asking for that money to now be set aside for that portion of the project. Am I understanding that correctly?
I mean, we're only going to expend the 300 for this fiscal year. We're not going to expend the 575 for the lockers. We're not doing the lockers in this fiscal year.
Right.
So we're
But I
not.
think what we're saying, Chief, is that you have an appropriation for that. You're just saying you're not going to spend it right now.
That's
which-
correct. We're not going to
Which we
spend.
understand, right.
Yep,
Okay.
that's correct.
So that's great. So now you're going to go ahead and spend that. That will be, okay. That will be great. And this receives, go ahead. Oh, Mike, yes, please.
So I guess maybe I'm in the same boat as John here, where I'm confused as I'm totaling up the things. We appropriated 904 last year. If I total the numbers that of the 5 items of those original, or the 9, they would total 906. So somehow we were off by $2,000 on the estimates that were there. If in those 5 things that were included was already the locker room improvements, and these other 4 items that aren't there, what is this new money that's being asked for going towards? Is that going to be going towards like parking? Is that going towards, the Sally Port, the flooring, the kitchen casework? It's a very specific number that seems like almost that it's covering the locker room. And so I guess it would be, I think maybe I'm off, maybe I'm not on the same page as you, John, but what I'm seeing is if you're saying we still got $600,000 left that hasn't been spent, that's going to cover the 575 to do the locker rooms if you want to do it this year. So why would we earmark any more at this point? And why not just wait till next year?
Yeah.
And I believe that this got a unanimous negative from the capital committee. Is that, as I was there? Okay? I think for that very reason.
Okay, that makes sense.
Any further questions on this? Any more questions? Okay. I think I have any more questions on that. All right. So next up, we have appropriate 186, 238 from borrowing for 3 replacement police department vehicles. So take it away. Can talk about those. What year they were. I have this down. I have this list, this wonderful list.
Yeah, did you
And
share the
thank
list
you.
with everybody else?
Yes, thank you so much for all that information. I actually read all of it. Believe it or not, I'm up till quite late looking through all of these things. It's fascinating. I learned a lot about different kinds of cars.
So what the police department is actually looking for is 4 vehicles. So the first one, it's broken down to 3 and then 1 because that's how the quotes came in, because 3 of them are Explorers and 1 of them is a F-150 pickup truck. But the reason why it's a little different this year is the first year that the models have come up with that the police vehicle packages before was just a car and a SUV. And then this year they've changed it. They've made a package that is in the shape of a pickup truck, but it's still used as a patrol vehicle. So it's a little confusing why they're in different lines, but they just came in different quotes. What we really do need is 4 patrol vehicles. The patrol vehicles are going to be replacing car 2, which is a 2017 Ford Explorer that has 82,000 miles on it. Car 3, which is just sitting dead in our parking lot, that's a 2006 Ford Explorer with 88,000 miles on it. A car 6, which is a 2017 Ford Explorer with 73,000 miles on it, and car 10, which is 2017 Ford Explorer with 85,000 miles on it. The suggested life expectancy of a online police car, a marked police car that's out in the community every single day, by MHQ is where we buy our cars, is 3 years. That's when they say if you trade in the car every 3 years, you'll get the best car for the dollar. The reasoning is that you can take the equipment out of the car and use it for the next car, because the equipment that's in the car will only has life expectancy as well. And that life expectancy of the equipment is about 5 years. So what we've been able to do is we try to make our cars last 5 years. And then that's the whole package. The cars tend to need more repairs, but we don't have to double up on buying equipment every 3 years. So as you can see, these cars we have right now, car 3 is 8 years old. That car, the resale value of that car is, well, right now it's pennies because it's completely dead. But a resale car of that value is about $500. The reason why it's dead is because the repairs are like $2,000 and needs a complete transmission. So yeah, we're not going to put $2,000 into a car that's worth $500 and only use it for until the next repair needs. So when you're having cars that are 6, 7, 8 years old, the repairs are much more expensive than it's even worth. The cars are completely beaten down. These are cars that have a life expectancy, like I said, of 3 years that we try to extend to 5. And because of the difficulty it is to get cars right now, we push that as much as we can. So the other thing is that since 2020, we purchased hybrid cars, and these are all gasoline cars. They're not even worth, I wouldn't even, if the fire department would like to take a look and see if they can harvest one of these cars, they can. Car 3, which needs a new transmission, is there. But we have in the past, if we have a car that has some life in it, share it with other town agencies. With the green initiative, we can only now share it with the fire department, unless it's a hybrid car, which all of our cars right now aren't. The ones that we're getting rid of aren't hybrids. So every once in a while we can share one with the fire department, but these cars aren't worth it. They leak. They have puddles of water on the floorboards. These are pretty beat up cars. So that's why we're looking for 4 cars. And like I said, it was broken down to 3 and 1 because one is a different make than the others, but they're all 4 of them are patrol vehicles.
Could you say that part again about the green initiative and who you can share with? I love sharing though.
I think I can probably answer that for Bill a little bit easier.
Okay, all right, you're on.
Believe it or not, technically, our Explorers, because they're an SUV body, even though they're a car engine, fit the green model. So certain ones can go to other departments and still not affect our environmental evaluation for the city, being a green city. We looked at this when we started getting the SUVs because we were at the time they had a Ford Taurus body on the same exact frame, same exact engine as the SUV, but because of the body style, it actually didn't fit the green initiative, which doesn't make any sense, right? It's just the body style, but because it's an SUV body style, it would work. So we started switching to those a while back, was the SUV bodies, which also does fit. We even looked at when we were talking about getting Ford Fusions, but this is before the hybrid craze. The Ford Fusions actually didn't fit the green plan. Even though it was a smaller car with better fuel efficiency, it didn't hit the car fuel efficiency. SUV fuel efficiency is different. I understand it doesn't make a lot of sense. I worked with Carol Collins on this back when I was first here. So it was a weird combo, but that's what it was. Now, all the vehicles for us are hybrid when we're buying them. Our Unmarks are hybrid. Our new Cruisers are hybrid. One of the reasons we got so far behind with cars was we were first generation hybrid. And when we ordered ours, we found out very quickly you can't put normal police cages in a hybrid because you drill the batteries. So we were kind of the guinea pigs, and then everybody went to a different type of cage in their Cruisers. So everything we buy now, with the exception of the pickup truck, which you can get a hybrid pickup truck, you're just going to pay a lot more money for it, is a hybrid vehicle. All our police vehicles, all of our unmarked cars that we're buying now are hybrids. So that's where we're at. So our hybrid vehicles will be able to be pushed out down the road as they go offline with us.
The other point is that, like ambulances, we can't just go to the lot and pick up cars. It's still going to take us almost a year to get these cars in service. So these cars aren't actually going to see the street until 2020. What are we in right now? 2023, 2024. Yeah.
So I thought they were coming in a little bit more rapidly.
That is still rapid. The last car we bought took 18 months. So
18 months, okay.
You can, like the pickups that he's talking about, the electric pickups, you can't even order them.
Okay,
Like they have them on their order sheet for the state contract. They're not accepting any bid, they're not accepting any orders on certain vehicles. It's still way out on all vehicles.
right.
So we have to wait until the window opens, and then we order the vehicles, and then we have to wait for them to be built. Once they're built and shipped to the dealer, then the dealer takes about 4 to 6 months to put the equipment in because they're so far behind because they can't find employees to upfit cars. So it's a difficult situation to buy emergency vehicles right now. So at the best rate, if the cars happen to be on the lot, we're still probably waiting 6 months and they won't be on the lot. So it's 6 to 12 months before we get a car.
So what is the standard for number of cars? Because I know I learned a lot about cars this season. the number of cars that one would have per, like if you had 10 officers, or if you have six on a shift, how many cars does one need? There must be a standard police number. I couldn't find it.
I mean, if we have 6 people working, there's at least 6 cars running.
Right.
But you need more than 6 cars because you
Yeah.
need to have you have to have them cycle on and off for lifespan. The reason why
Currently,
we're
we have
able to,
10 to 11 marked vehicles for the marked cars for the 18 patrol officers. K9 vehicle is marked as well. And that's a separate car. Obviously, he has his own car because he's got the dog. We have 2 K9 officers, so they each have a car for their dogs. But when you're looking at, an 18-person, patrol rotation when we're fully staffed with the 666, you're looking at 5 marked cars per every shift that's out there. So you don't want to run them 24 hours a day. You really only want to run a marked vehicle 16 out of the 24 hours. If you want to keep them going. We obviously don't do that. We run several cars 24 hours a day because we don't have a full stack of cars right now. But typically you want to shut them down for at least 8 hours a day if you want to make them last the 3 to 5 years.
and that's one of the reasons why we can get it to last 7 to 8 years. And that's not, I mean, we really can't get them to last 7 or 8 years, but
We still have the
Band-Aid
original
it.
group of cars I purchased my first year here at the end of 2013.
I can see that 2008, you've got a 2008 down here.
Yeah, that's got to go.
that's
A
like,
year ago, a year and a half ago, did we have one K9 vehicle?
We just the first K9 came with the Shepherd. The second K9 vehicle is one of the original cruisers I think I purchased. I think that's a 2014, if I'm correct.
Yep.
That we converted to a K9 vehicle.
When did that happen?
About last year, maybe, when we got the second.
no,
K9.
it was Donut's car. So,
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
2019, that was converted.
So one was converted in 2019
Correct.
and the other one?
2021, 2020. Yeah, 2021.
Okay. All right. So you had a lease schedule out here, and that's what you've been doing. You had a
Everything
lease,
I've done since 2013 had been a lease until this year. Yes.
yeah, and that was working. That seemed to be working pretty well, and we were paying 55,000 the end of this year. Is still due 55,000 June
God, no.
30th?
No, if we lease now, it would be minimum
That's what's in there.
64,000 because of the price increases on the cars. For 3 vehicles, it would be about $64,000 a year for a lease for 3 years for 3 vehicles per year.
Could you say that again, please?
Yep, for 3 vehicles on a lease right now. And again, I'm just going on a rough estimate because I don't know what the bids would be. Bids can be anywhere from 2.5% to 4% typically from a lease company, depending on what the bank rates are. Laura would probably know what they are better than me right now. But basically what you do is you take one marked vehicle, which if you look at that sheet, the one marked vehicle is about $62,080 for one vehicle. So you're buying 3 of them and you're doing a 3-year lease. So you're taking that 62 and then whatever the percentage is for the year, you're buffering that on. So you're looking at about a couple grand a year to add on to that lease. So they would be around $64,000 to $65,000 a year for 3 years for 3 vehicles.
Right.
Say
Say that last sentence one more time.
Yeah, $64,000 a year for 3 years straight for 3 vehicles.
Right. What a bargain. That's a, but.
On top of what we're already paying.
Our operating budget was cut. So the first thing I cut out of that is going to be vehicles. That's why that's not in that lease line anymore. That's why we're going to capital this time. I don't have the money in my lease line to be able to do leases. So that's why I'm going to capital this time because we need the vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only
Okay.
reason for, if it was in our operating budget, it would be a lease. You are correct, Kelsey.
All right, that's what I want to know, because I could see, I actually follow Munis, which very nicely Director Schindler sends to us, and I could see that there is still in that, in the expense line, there is the 55,000, and I
We
think I
have one
talked
more
to you.
payment on the last 3
Yes.
years. So that's what
And
that.
so it is, to be fiscally responsible for the city, one way for 3 cars, you would pay 186,000. And a borrowing, do we not usually borrow for things that are going to last a little longer? Don't we usually borrow money for things that are supposed to last a certain amount of time?
Yes, for a certain amount and a certain useful life, that's correct, yes.
Okay. All right.
And we are making them, typically, we're making them last at least 5 years. If you look at that vehicle schedule that Bill gave you, which was very detailed. The mileage is in there for every vehicle and who they're assigned to. So, you know, some of those vehicles have pretty high mileage, but we still have the original unmarks from my first year again. I think there's
Right.
2014s we're still running. So we typically try to make those unmarked cars last 8 to 10 years. And
In other words, we don't turn those back when the
Right.
lease is over.
no, once
I
the
get
lease is up, it's a lease to
We
own.
own them. It's just a financing agreement.
Right. No, I read through the lease agreement and it looked like a great idea. And it looked like a good way that we were doing that. And certainly the money was available to pay for the last one.
So after I talked to you about the money that is in the lease line this year, and I explained to you that it's because we paid the lease in June, we have now encumbered that. So that line shouldn't read that anymore.
Okay, well, it's good. I'm glad it's there to pay for. And I certainly think people should be in safe vehicles. It's this that accelerate well and that stop when they need to. But this lease thing seems to be working for us. Does anybody have any more questions on this? Yes, go
I have a
ahead.
question, and this may not be germane, so you may not want to answer, but recently there was a police car stopped outside of my home, not for something with me, but something, and it was parked there and it was idling for a long time. And I'm connecting that to having the cars run 24 hours. And I'm wondering if you have any policy against.
Yeah, I can answer that for you,
Thank
Counselor.
you.
The amount of equipment that we have in our vehicle that is running the whole time is why we have to leave it running. The idea though with the hybrid is it's shutting down the gas while it's idling. That's the point of the hybrid, is to keep the power going for all the equipment inside. The computers take a long time to boot up once they shut off. The lights, if the lights are on and it's idling, it has to idle because it will kill the battery in the car exceptionally fast with the lights. We don't typically idle the cars, all the time, but when they're in service, they do idle a lot, which is the idea of the hybrids. We have radar detectors, you have the radios on, you've got the computers, there's a lot of other equipment that are in that car, unfortunately, that are running off of battery, and you shut that car down completely, and most of that shuts down with it. And then you're turning it back on and it's rebooting. The computers have to reboot. The radios have to recount. There is a reason for it. I understand that it's not ideal, but the idea of having the hybrids is cutting down on the gas that you're using while it's idle.
That's not true. What he just told you is not true. I'm not a member of the committee, but I want you to know that that's not true. I can tell you why later.
Okay. I mean, that's why we're saving on gas.
Okay.
I'll just say, I'm glad that we're going to hybrid.
Well, I think that the chief, I'm going to compliment you, Chief Haig. I think you were straight out of when you came, that you were the person that thought of the hybrids. That I heard that you went, we're thinking right of the energy efficient ones. And I think this lease thing has been working, and I'm glad that we're using hybrids. And because I think that's something we could all be thinking about.
I think in a couple of years, we'll be going to all electric.
That is even.
But there's some infrastructure that needs to be done and some technology needs to be done, but that's where the world is going to.
Yes, it is. And so we should be moving along with that. There's whole cities that I read about. I actually am on an email list now. I think they think I'm a police officer. I am getting so many emails and they're inviting me to these fleet things, but I'm not. But I've learned a lot about it, and most of them, I know, and I don't really know very much about cars, but the lease thing, actually, I just want to go to the fiscal part of this. This does not make sense to me, but and so you can explain that. It's $186,000 where I read the lease. Laura, I would thank you for sending that to me, because it took me a couple of times going through it. And then I talked with someone else about it, and you pay for the first one right off the bat. You pay for that when you take the cars, then you pay for the second one. And then the third year, you're paying for the third one. And so you're not taking the whack all at once. And I can see that from looking at the list, that some of these cars they have 88,000 miles on them, and they're driven, I think maybe you told me this, you try to not drive them like one shift during the day. That makes sense, just like we get tired, I guess. I don't really know how cars feel, to tell you the truth, and they don't feel.
I don't think they need a nap.
Cars go off of-
It's good to shut the car off.
Counselor, cars go off of hours of usage, not necessarily just miles.
Right.
That's the other-
Okay. Yes. So,
And don't forget, when you lease, it builds up, so it's not like next year, if we need 4 more cars, you're going to build on top of that lease. And then the following year, you need more cars, you can build on top of that lease payment. So at the end of the day, you're still going to be paying X amount per car.
I get it. I get it, but we weren't. But now I have one other question on the cars. We bought one car this year. Where was that? We bought one car. I learned a lot from the deputy chief. I had to go look up what a UCDB car was. I thought it was a type of car. It was an undercover car. So we purchased a car for $46,000. I actually thought it was a type of vehicle. It was $46,347. We purchased a car. There's no subtraction from that in Munis. And we took possession of that in October.
That
I wanted
was
to know
paid
how
out
we
of
paid.
the law enforcement trust. That's why. It was paid out of the law enforcement trust. That's the money that we get from the working with the anti-crime task force with the district attorney's office, state police. We have an officer that's assigned to that. There's specific, and Diana can help me out with this one, but there's specific things that you can use that account for. And that vehicle is used for that task force, for the use in that task force. It was money that was made by that task force. It was money that we reinvested back in that task force. That money is not general fund money.
Is there more money in that law enforcement trust?
There is. Yep.
Are you able to tell us the amount?
Off the top of my head, Diana might be able to. I'm not off the top of my head. I can't recall.
I can get it.
Okay, we'd like to know that.
Yeah.
I read that Holyoke bought a Tesla with their forfeiture fund. They bought a Tesla.
That's that's LET's
That's what you're
forfeiture
talking
fund.
about. That's the LET.
Okay.
Yeah.
They had 400,000, I think they had.
East Hampton bought 2 of them.
Yes, with
But
these.
got them through a grant, but they can only be used for specific things. You can't put as of yet, I've yet to see it in Massachusetts, a Tesla with a police cage in the back of it, but I'm sure they're coming.
I think I read one that did, and I thought it was fascinating to me. I didn't actually know much about that. So that's what that was paid for. So we'll
Yeah, they're
find out
using
if
them
there
for
was more
patrol
money in
vehicles,
that.
but they don't have cages.
But
in them.
you can't just use LET money for general purpose budgeting money. There's a specific reasons for, like, narcotics investigations. You can use that money for narcotics types of investigations, but you can't utilize it as your operating budget.
Correct.
The special purpose fund.
Oh, no, I understand, but it was a special purpose fund. This is my 4th year. It was a special purpose fund that I wasn't aware of. I'm just saying, and I'm delighted that exists and that we could buy that car with it. I think that's great. So
When I
that's
first got here, that account wasn't all that fruitful. We've had somebody with that task force doing exceptional work for the city of Greenfield.
Right.
With that group, and that's where that funding is coming from. It's through forfeitures. It's through court revocations of different property for anti-crime types of stuff, narcotics. It's part of the human trafficking. The whole works is all part of the district attorney's office, and then they divvy out where the money goes to what town based on how much time your department puts into either the task force or if the investigation starts in your community. There's a whole lot of ways that the money gets divvied out. And our officer works exceptionally hard with that group. And we felt it very appropriate to the vehicle we had before was brutal. So we felt it needed to be replaced, and that's why we did it. So.
Well, I think that's wonderful because I wondered where I'm glad that we got it, and that's good. All right. Yes.
I'm going to ask you a question about people taking cars home.
Oh, yes. This might be a question that I ask to everyone.
Yep.
is how many people, yes, take cars home?
Yep. So myself and the deputy, ours are the contractual ones, no different than Chief Strahan. We have our lieutenant, and everybody else is relegated to and from work unless you get special prior approval. You know, I'm not gonna, you know, if somebody's stopping to get gas and a gallon of milk, I don't flip out on it. But we're talking about nobody's using them for personal reasons. You're not going out to dinner. You're not, you know, doing grocery shopping, that kind of thing. But we have our lieutenant that has a vehicle. Our detective sergeant, supervisor of all our specialty units, has a vehicle.
A detective sergeant? Okay, yes, all right, go ahead.
That's in charge of all our specialty, has a vehicle. When our detectives are on call, they can take a vehicle. When they're in the overnight on call, they get to take a vehicle. We have 2 canine officers, so those vehicles go home. And the undercover vehicle does not stay in our parking lot for obvious reasons. Did I forget anybody, DC?
So how many cars is that altogether then that go home? And do they all go to Green?
Seven.
7. And do they all go to Greenfield?
No.
Okay, how many are outside of Greenfield, just so I know?
We have a couple in Turners.
Okay, well, that's just right next door.
Yeah, we don't have any that go a distance.
Well, that was something, as the new fleet manager that they're writing to, that was something that they were talking about. No,
Yeah.
I'm joshing.
No, we don't. We don't do that. But yeah, if we have special occasions such as people that are going to training and it's closer for them to leave directly from where they're at, we'd allow something like that. That's what I mean by a special request. You know, if they're training in Amherst and they live in, you know, Leverett, it's easier than just having the car in Leverett for the week than driving back and forth all the way to Greenfield every day. It actually saves us mileage.
And overtime.
That doesn't happen very often, but that would be an example of a special request. So.
And I watched, by the way, the public safety and welcome to the new officers. They all seem.
We're excited.
Yeah, that was very nice. So, all right.
Can I just address something just real quick? Councilor Bottomley, I'm not trying to lie here. I don't know every aspect of the car. I can tell you that our batteries in our vehicles, when the car gets shut off our equipment. That's why they idle. I don't know the ins and outs. I'm not an engineer of the vehicle, but that's what we talked about. So I'm not trying to insult you by that, but I don't appreciate being accused of being a liar. I'm not trying to do that, sir.
No, it was,
No,
yeah.
so the officers tend to leave the heat and the AC.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Doing this.
Yep, Council
Point of
Forgy.
order.
Do this.
Thank you. This is a meeting of Ways and Means,
Mhm.
and it is not appropriate, in my opinion. We need to get on with our business and not recognize others unless they're called on.
Second.
Okay,
May I be?
yes, you may be recognized, Director Schindler.
I just, for the record, wanted to just go back to the building for a second on behalf of the police, because I am sort of new to this discussion. I wasn't here the previous year when the project was first brought forth. So I just looked up from 2023, the request. So I just want to remind the Ways and Means Committee that the original request that was brought to you did include all of these projects, including the water filtration, the new Sally Port, the dispatch room, the locker rooms, some other additional equipment and securing the existing site utilities. But it was a complete project at $1.85 million. So I presume then what happened last year is half of the money approximately was provided. And so thus this year coming forth with seemingly what is the second half of the money. And so I presume what the chief was saying is that in this first half of the money, they're still working through the beginning stages of this project, which have now been prioritized to be the locker rooms, the water filtration, and the site, the fencing. But what Laura is telling me, my chief procurement officer, is that because of the sort of delay in, or not delay, but just the extension of the project, that we're doing it over multiple years, the costs continue to escalate as we, as the project is in flux, so to speak, or is in process. So I just, to that point, I just want to mention that's, I presume, why we're here asking for another, $900,000, because it was part of the original request. And so while we're still working through a beginning phase of the project, presumably at some point, those monies will not be enough to cover some of these things that we're getting underway. So I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Councilor Bartley.
I did want to go back. I had a question on the patrol vehicles. One of them was an F-150 truck, and the Capital Improvements Committee really had an issue with that when I went back and watched that meeting. So I'm curious if you could talk about why an F-150 would be included in the patrol vehicle needed.
I tried to explain that in the beginning, is just because the body shape is a shape of a pickup truck. This year is the first year they've had shapes of a pickup truck added into what's called a pursuit patrol vehicle. So it's really just another patrol vehicle. It's just the shape of a pickup truck. Does that?
So I'm just confused. Why wouldn't we get 4 Explorers then? Why would we need an F-150?
Thank you. Okay. So, a lot of times we'll pick up bicycles, we'll pick up large items, we'll pick up, we have to go to the dump, with metal objects or whatnot. We live in New England, there's needs for that. We have been for dump runs and et cetera. We used the shared pickup truck with the fire department, and that's been working out fine. But another more important reason is that in the back of a pickup truck, we can put larger equipment such as stanchions to be able to close roads. Right now, if we have to close a road at like 10 o'clock at night, we have to call the DPW. The DPW then hires somebody overtime to go and get their pickup truck, which then we're on scene for a much longer period of time, waiting for somebody to come from home, to get to the DPW, to pick up their pickup truck, to put the stanchions in the back of their pickup truck, to come to the scene. We have a fire going on. We're trying to close roads. We need officers to go on calls. It takes an extended period of time to do that. We want to be able to have that equipment with us. And the on-duty officer can just set up a stanchion and go to the next side of the road, set up a stanchion. We don't have to call for any overtime. The cones.
Right, and
stuff
that
like that.
brings up kind of another thing I was just curious about vehicle sharing between departments.
Yep.
Because that was something, do we want to duplicate all these vehicles with every department?
Sure. So there's different needs for different departments. He can speak on the needs for his department, but in our department, for example, we're in charge when there's a fire, we're in charge of closing the roads. Right now, if we wanted to do that, we would have to go to the fire department, pick up the fire truck, go to the DPW, pick up the stanchions, pick up the cones, pick up all the equipment, and then be able to go to the fire. But we don't have a fire or police or whatever if there's a tree down. For example, the big snowstorm, we had trees down everywhere. And we had one DPW worker with a pickup truck trying to chase down our police cars. In the meantime, we're holding up the police cars from going to the next calls because they don't have the equipment they have either. A pickup truck can hold hundreds of cones, where right now, in that particular reason, there are times that we do share a pickup truck and very successful. That every once in a while we need to go to the dump, we'll use the pickup truck. But in this case, we need a patrol vehicle. We need 4 patrol vehicles. And in this case, having it the shape of a pickup truck gives us the cargo capability to do 2 jobs at once. If that makes sense. We could buy a Ford Explorer, but you're not going to put road stanchions and 100 cones in the back of a Explorer that also has a cage in it for prisoners. But that pickup truck will have a cage and a 6.5 foot bed that will be able to put all that stuff in there. The right tool for the right job.
For me, I look at it as the multi-purpose. It's going to be a patrol vehicle. It's going to be part of the line. It's not just going to be sitting there idle, waiting for it to be used. So it's a multi-purpose vehicle. That's all. Could I have 4 Explorers? That'd be great. I need 4 vehicles, period. There's not much of a difference between the price on this pickup to the hybrid, but if we go to another hybrid, another Ford Explorer, that price, is not that much different. So, again, it's 4 vehicles, but we're looking for something that's multi-purpose. That's all.
The difference in the cost of the Explorers and that pickup truck is about $100.
Great, thank you.
All right, do we have more questions on this? Mike, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, actually, when I was looking at this, I kind of thought the same thing as Councilor Bottomley at first, and I started to think about what you were just talking about was the different needs of different departments, and even liking it to other professions that I've been in throughout my life. And I think it's actually a pretty smart thing to do, just for that sake, is you never know when you might need something with extra space. I had a couple trucks that I was running at a time, and like one had a 6-foot bed with a cap. That was great sometimes when I needed to keep things covered. However, sometimes I needed to fit a sheet of plywood. Can't really do that in a 6-foot bed. I had one that had an 8-foot bed. So you have different uses, and I think that's actually really smart. I think this is a good, though I can see on the surface why a truck might not seem as efficient as a SUV. There are some other things to consider besides just, fuel efficiency or things of that nature, where those needs may outweigh some of those other concerns that we try to instill in being cost effective in a lot of the departments that we're looking at. So in cases where we have, I remember like the health department cars or something like that, like, yeah, they could go in like a Prius or something, they go in a very small car because they don't really need much. But there are times where you may have to spend a little bit more gas to be able to get the job done right.
Would you put a cage in the back of it?
Yep, it's a patrol vehicle.
Yes. Yep.
So instead
That
of
would be part of the line, it would be part of our rotation. That would be the kind of dual purpose,
Basically, it's just sheet metal. So one's shaped of as SUV and one's shaped as a pickup truck. But it's basically the same engines, the same suspensions. They're a little different, but in a basic sense, it's a F-150 is basically a car with a truck body.
That's the model we went with. A fire prevention car that will be and probably it gives us a lot more versatility than a standard car. In his particular case, he's got to carry. So it's
Just as a joke. Sorry, I was just gonna say, just as a joke, us who drive trucks don't consider a 150 a truck.
That's why I said it's a car. It's a truck on a car body.
Sorry. I didn't know. Have you done that, Mike?
Well
You
said.
live and learn. That was great.
I did have another question.
Go ahead, yes. please.
This one might be for the mayor, the finance director. So are we going forward looking at no longer doing leasing and we'll be doing capital expenditure for all our vehicles in the future?
Well, I wouldn't say for all leases, and I can't speak for the mayor, but I think currently in our operating budget, we are limited revenues. So I know for FY24, we were looking at taking out the lease payment.
Councilor, 4 of my vehicles are leased, and we plan on, when those leases come due, continuing with the lease program because it's been very successful for us and we've been able to keep the costs down for the city.
Thank you.
The mayor has her hand.
Yes, Mayor. Okay, I see 2 hands. Mayor's first and then Chief Hague is next.
I was just going to say, it really depends on the year and where we're at in the budget. Sometimes leases make a lot of sense. So no decision has been made to do one thing or the other. It really depends on how we analyze our budgets as we are creating them. So it could be a lease, it could be a purchase. In this case, I think the purchases make sense. These are replacing very old vehicles. We do have the ability to, I think that's been proven regardless of which department has vehicles, whether it's DPW or fire or police. We do have the ability to use them to their fullest extent, sometimes to their detriment, because we're replacing rusty vehicles. We're, trying to fix up already rusty vehicles. But so leases make sense sometimes, and putting them in the operating budget makes sense other times. But in this particular case, the operating budget, which you'll be receiving very shortly, need a little relief. So putting these into the capital budget seemed to make sense because of the longevity, because they're replacing very old vehicles in most cases.
Thank
I
you.
think Chief Hague has.
Oh, Chief Hague, go ahead, please. Yep.
Having done this both ways, especially when I was the chief in Orange, between purchasing and leasing, one of the reasons that I went to the lease program was because we did get so far behind in a replacement schedule. When I was in Orange, obviously not as many cars we had in Greenfield. So you were kind of on that one every year. As long as you kept a new car coming every year, it back then, $37,000. You could stay on a good schedule of kind of every 3 years, still keep them 5, but you were buying a car every year. For a place like Greenfield, when I came here, the fleet was so depleted and so old. And, we had cars that were painted from other departments. The lease made sense because we could get several vehicles right away. But if you look back, and I'm sorry I didn't provide you with, lease like stats from way back, but I'm sure they're easy enough to find. The idea on a lease, when you do this, is typically, and I'm just going to use round numbers, these are not exact, but you can look at kind of the waves I had at the beginning when I was here. The first year when you get your 3 vehicles, say it's 60 grand. The second year you're doing another lease, so it's 60 grand plus a new lease, so it makes it 120 grand. In that following year, which is the third year of the first year lease, because now you're going to start another year lease, it goes to 180 grand. Then it comes back down in that fourth year because you're dropping back down to 2. So it peaks and valleys. So if you were to stay on a replacement schedule for the 3 cars, every third year, you would see that 180. Just I'm using round numbers, 180, a big spike in that third year. And then it would start coming back down, and then it would spike back up again. So the lease isn't flawless. It's not like every year it's only going to be 60 grand as you replace those vehicles on a replacement schedule. The reason our leases this year are low is we've missed a year. So we're kind of finishing out the third year of a lease. We haven't started a new lease in 3 years. We paid off the remaining lease, I think, last year for the lease we had before. So we hadn't been over that kind of double payment in a long time. So typically you'd always be in a double payment, and then year 3 you'd have a triple payment, and then you go back to double payment. So the lease is good because often years you can find a 2.5%. Well, that's great. And we've been lucky with getting anywhere from 2.5% to 3% when we put our bids out. But we've missed so much that this is in a tough year with the budget. We need 4 vehicles now. And that's the reason for this request. Next year, maybe I will be putting back in a lease request, and we start back with the replacement schedule with leases. Does that make sense? Did I muddy it even more?
No, makes sense.
Go ahead, Councilor Gola.
I thought that I was clear, and now I feel less clear, but I'm not sure. I think I'm here, but we will get to clarity. So I feel like I'm hearing 2 different numbers. I think the number, Chief Hague, that you repeated several times for us was 64 to 65,000 per year for 3 years for 3 vehicles. But then the second thing that I think I just heard you say is like 1 year 60, then 120, then 180.
I was just using round numbers as an example of how it works. Under a lease, you would be doing 2 separate leases each year, but on year 3, you'd have 3 lease payments. On the schedule that Deputy Chief Gordon gave you replacements, that's what a lease would look like. So I was just using round numbers. If you want to use like our numbers right now, you'd be looking at somewhere around 65 grand for the lease for just 3 vehicles. Next year, when we start a new lease, you'd be looking at 130. No, that's only 3, the 65. If we added the 4,
we're looking to get 4.
Yeah,
right.
It would be a higher lease if we were doing all 4 in the lease. I'm only going with it because it's broken out. So if you look at like our Explorers that we just put in for the 3 vehicles at 186,000, basically that's about with the lease, with the percentage increase, around 65 grand for a payment each year for the lease. So we would have that for this year if we did it. But next year we would start a new leasing program for the second round of vehicles for replacement. So now you're looking at $135,000 for that second year because you have 2 leases going. And then when you get the next lease going the following year, you've got 3 leases because you have the third year of the first one, the second year of the second one, and the first of the third one. So it does peak and valley. It never goes below the 2 if you're on a good replacement schedule. That's all. We've been off our replacement schedule. So this is a lump sum to buy them to get us back in place. And hopefully next year things will be better and I can put it back in the operating budget as a lease, and that would go in the operating budget.
I can draw it out if you wanted to.
Do you have more questions on that? I have more questions on that.
I don't want to take up too much time on it. I guess
It's an important
we're
issue.
leasing 3 cars at a time, but we need 4 cars. If we're leasing 3 cars at a time, is that 180 per year times 3? It's not, right?
No, I can show you. If you, can I borrow your pen? Okay. So on year 1, you have 1, 2, 3, right? So say you got 3 vehicles surrounded out and each vehicle is $65,000. You divide it by 3. So you have 65, 65 and 65.
Right.
Year 2, you buy 3 more vehicles.
3 more vehicles.
So you're 65, 65, 65. Year 3, you buy 3 more vehicles, 65, 65. This one goes out, but on year 4, you're buying 3 more vehicles, so you're 65, 65, 65.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful.
If we
sorry.
doing the lease every 3 years, then it would make sense. But
Okay.
no, we're doing a new one each year.
Okay.
But we haven't bought very many cars since 2020, so we're not on that regular schedule, but we need to get back on the regular schedule because we have cars that are now 8 years old because we haven't been able to keep up with the cars.
Okay.
And our maintenance budget hasn't gone up in several years, but as the cruisers get older, the maintenance costs are more. And these hybrids, once they're out of warranty, are expensive.
Oh, it's been challenging.
It's been very challenging with the hybrids.
I
They're good,
would-
but they're tough. So
I heard that. And will this be second generation hybrid or first generation? This is second generation?
I believe we're on third generation.
Third generation.
Yeah, This is even
Yep.
better. See, I mean, so much.
Right.
So I'd like to point out that actually, though, this is, we were following this schedule and we had a lease payment in this year that we are paying at the end of the year.
Right.
That we have followed. I just want to correct that, actually, that the mayor cut the leasing budget last year. I saw that there was a request. I went back and I looked because I get what you're saying, Chief Hague. Some years when you're at the beginning and you're doing a couple, it could be more. There was like a 145, and I think last year you requested 105. It was cut to 50 or 55, and we will be paying that because that money is still there. So
Well,
I don't think
I cut it.
I'm sorry,
I cut it, Counselor, but we hadn't started a new lease yet, so I only cut it back to what we owed on the current lease we had. There wasn't another lease out there. I wanted a new lease, but I cut that when we had to trim the budget down, that's all.
55.
So that 55's in there is for the last payment on the current lease we have. That's the only lease we currently have.
Okay, that's fine. I just would say as the budget was presented to me last year, and I was just looking at that an hour ago. I don't have it in front of me. As it was presented to me last year, there was a request from you for 105, and then it was down to 55, which we'll be paying. But that's fine. It's neither here nor there. I can see that cars, you put a lot of mileage on the cars, and then another plan needs to happen. So I understand.
We're not driving Lexuses.
No, you're not. I'm not either. Mine has 60,000 something on it, and I wait until something bad starts leaking out of it. But it's all good. So do we have more questions on this? Any more questions? Okay, and these received all of these, because they thought it should be operating, these received a negative recommendation from the Capital Committee. So this is our last chance to ask questions of anyone, including Director Schindler, because tomorrow it will be the 5 of us deliberating on the capital budget.
And also, the fire chief wanted you to know that the lease for the ambulance is 60,000.
Oh, that's great.
That's what's coming out.
It's just, I was thinking about that. So. Any more questions on? Any more questions for anybody?
I think I'm good.
Okay, all right, then in that case, it's 10 minutes of 8. Oh, wait a minute, I have to say something else. There's something else I'm supposed to say at the end of this.
Right.
Our next meeting. Is there any other business? Does anybody have any other business that they'd like to bring up now is related to finance only? Okay, our next meeting will be here tomorrow night, Thursday, March 30th at 6 p.m. at the City Hall Meeting Room. Second floor, Zoom hybrid unless otherwise posted. Fiscal year 2024 capital budget deliberations and recommendations. And I will take a motion to adjourn.
So move, 4G.
Okay, so moved in second. This is from television, the second and whatever. So we're gonna, so all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so we're calling this to an end at 7:50 p.m. and thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Okay.